I'm going to talk about sway and how the chest and the pelvis both move some amount side to side. So sway is a two-dimensional movement towards and away from the target. What's interesting is there's a relationship between the sway of the upper body and sway of the lower body, depending on how you test out for your golf swing. So for some people, the tip of getting behind the ball in the backswing is extremely beneficial, and for some people, it's not very good. As my friend Mike Adams says, for some it's magic, for some it's tragic. For other people, the tip of staying centered is also a great tip. Magic for some, tragic for others. And the thought of staying behind the ball for some people is okay. I generally don't like it. I'm going to come on to that. And the thought of, covering it for some people is good. So which one are you? Are you a stay behind the ball, a cover, or are you a get behind the ball or stay centered golfer? So there's all this misinformation and confusion in golf. So how do you decide? Well, the two main assessments that we do to decide what the upper body and lower body does are the trail hand, also the trail arm fold test. So your hands can either rotate in the backswing, when the elbow stays sort of stable in front of you, or for some people, the elbow will pull in which case the hand doesn't rotate very much. This has a big effect on how the upper body works. So we're going to talk about the chest stroke upper body first. And to learn it, I'm going to give you a feel. So imagine you have a steering wheel in your hand. And as you turn the steering wheel to the right, so I have some very interesting steering wheel friends. Some move the steering wheel, so don't do that. And some, I don't know, can't really imagine a steering wheel, but just imagine we're steering this wheel so you can see the middle of the wheel stays in the middle. So as I steer the steering wheel to the right and finish my golf swing, it's going to pull me more to the trail side. Okay, so that person who has this type of rotation in the backswing is going to end up more behind the ball. Now this kind of golfer, if they allow themselves to move behind the ball, no problem. If this golfer stays centered, they will tend to pull the ball. So somebody who would naturally be moving like this, but they went to the make sure you stay centered advice source, they'll get in trouble. The other way is if I rotate the steering wheel this way, then as I go back, so I'm steering the steering wheel and then turning, I'm going to end up a little bit more tilted, but specifically, slightly nearer to the target at the top of the backswing than I was at address. So this reverse steering wheel style is for somebody who, when they do this test, their elbow pulls up and back. Someone like Rory McIlroy, who historically would start his swing with a little tilt to the left, he'd end up a little bit across the line. But that centeredness is very important for delivering the club direction and face consistency and ground contact that you need. So there's two different styles. Obviously, there's some people in the middle, someone like Justin Rowles. So you're either somebody that goes behind the ball, some amount, stays centered, or you're somewhere in the middle of those. So that would be like the hybrid style. So basically, if you're somebody that has more of an under style, you're going to be a little bit more behind the ball with your upper body at the top of the backswing. If you're more of an on-top golfer, you want to make sure that you stay really centered at the top of the backswing. In the middle, small amount of movement off the ball is normal for a side-on golfer. The lower body is very much determined by the post test. So I have my club on the ground here. If I put the club across my hips, and see I've got this red stick in front of me here. If I just turn my hips to the right, me personally, I stay very centered. Some people, when they do this drill, they move to the right side. We call those a rear post golfer. And some people move to the lead side. Now, what we're talking about when we talk about sway is measuring a movement in the golf swing. So sway can show up like this. Someone like Luke Donald, for example, or Sungjae Im, they're going to continue swaying their pelvis away from the target until the top of the backswing. You're going to sway into this sort of flex trail leg so they can push back. The timing of this is key. So somebody who is a rear post golfer, they move to the right and they tested, remember to keep your head still when you do that, they will move their pelvis to the right side, and the pelvis will not start moving left until it's very late in the backswing. Someone like Bryson DeChambeau or Tony Finau, Zach Johnson, they will move about maybe 1 inch-ish to the trail side, but once the club gets to here, they're already starting to sway back towards the target. So there's a significant timing difference and quantity of sway difference. The people that move to the right for a longer period of time sway more. The people that move to the right for a shorter period of time and then start going left sway less. So the trail arm fold test determines, it's not determines, but the trail arm fold test is definitely giving us a key indicator of what type of upper body movement you need. The post test is a really good indicator of where your pelvis should be in terms of sway in the backswing, downswing, and especially the timing of when the sway moves towards the target. Now, if we combine those two, we have what we call sway gap, and this is basically how you start putting the tests together into one complete movement. So somebody like Scott Scheffler is more of a front post golfer. So once he gets to about here, he is going to move onto his front foot very early. Top of the backswing, he's about 2.5 inches closer to the target with his pelvis than he was at address. He's also an on-top golfer, so he goes back with the club inside his hands. And this contributes to him being more of a forward upper body type player. So at the top of the backswing, Scotty Scheffler is actually more forward than he was at address. Now, the way I want you to think about it is like this. If I were to have something dangling down, like a Marion head cover from my shirt buttons, for example, the relationship between this and my zipper and my trousers would show me that I have either a away from the target sway gap, so my upper body is further away, or a towards the target sway gap, which means my upper body is closer to the target. So Scotty Scheffler is actually pretty stacked in that both his lower body and upper body are on top of each other, but forward of center. Somebody like Zach Johnson, who is an under golfer, but he's also a front post golfer, has his upper body significantly to the trail side of his zipper. So you just need to know, what's your style? Are you a lower body left early person, a lower body left late person? And in that process, are you going behind your zipper, staying on top of your zipper, or even for some people, staying in front of the zipper? So I'm going to talk through those different movement styles. The important thing is this has a real big effect on your swing direction and how sort of easily you can swing. So for example, if I am an on-top golfer, my tendency is to hit a little bit more down and left. So this person would be more like a low fade golfer. Somebody who's an under golfer is going to take it inside and swing out to the right, and somebody who's in the middle is going to be much more neutral. Now, as an under golfer, in order to be able to swing to the right, we found that the sway gap, the gap between the sways of the upper body, lower body, contributes a lot to the swing direction. So if you're somebody whose arm is oriented in such a way that it's going to swing out to the right, it also helps to have your body oriented in a way that supports that. And that's why the sway gap is the next step in this lesson process. So once you've worked out your hand path and your grip and your setup, we need to know how to organize our sways to support the natural releasing and club delivery style of our body. So to illustrate it, so Scott Scheffler, for example, tends to hit fades. So when he swings to the top, he actually has a slightly towards the target sway gap, where his upper body is just a little bit in front of his lower body. So he tends to hit fades. So that's going to cause or contribute to more of a leftward swing direction. So let's say there are generally 3 types of sway gap. You can have behind, sort of on top, and somewhat in front. So let's talk about the different styles. So somebody who is an on-top golfer and a rear post So the absolute numbers on Sportsbox are going to show that both chest and pelvis go away from the target until the top of the backswing. That's because the absolute number is driven by the amount that we're carrying our body to the trail side. Now the relative number means that the upper body should, so the zipper on my sweater should stay on the trail side of my pelvis slightly. So on top rear post, you're going to see a movement to the right and the zipper stay fractionally in front of the zipper on my pants. Now on sports bikes, that's going to be a pretty small number. It's going to be maybe about ½ an inch. So ½ an inch is already, pretty far over, so ½ to 1 inch. As a under golfer, I'm going to go for the other extreme, like Zach Johnson, and the pelvis to the left, upper body to the right. So we're going to be significantly to the trail side. And then of course, the most neutral would be the Justin Rowles, where there's a small movement to the trail side until about halfway back, and then recentering. So the pelvis and thorax are going to be pretty centered. So these have a big effect, as I said, on the direction of the swing. And it really helps to have it organized even at address. So the earlier we can organize something in a golf swing, the easier it is for us to take care of it. The later it gets, it becomes faster and harder to coordinate. So for an undergolf, we want to push the pelvis slightly forward at address to create a slightly higher lead hip and a little bit of more side bend in the spine. From here, it's a lot easier to get behind the ball. So we're setting it up, we're getting it into the backswing, and then we're able to carry that through transition. The on-top golfer, so the undergolf, we call that a K posture. So you can set up slightly forward with some side bend, high handle, hand under the glove. So from here, top of the backswing, you have that sort of reverse K of the upper body being behind the ball. For the more forward, more lead side of the lower body sway gap, we want more of a T posture. So you're going to bend over, keep the shaft straight, relatively level shoulders. It's not level because the trail hand is a little bit lower, but basically lower yourself down. From here, it's going to be a lot easier to stay more centered. And as you come through transition, everything is moving forward towards the target. So we've talked about setup sway gap. Under golfer is more tilted. On top golfer is more level. Side on golfer is always in the middle. Backswing. Under golfer is more behind the ball. On top golfer is more centered. The lower body rear post is further away from the target at the top of the backswing. Front post is already moving their pelvis towards the target early in the backswing. Now, there's a second sway gap that's really important. For somebody who is a pretty elite golfer, but maybe is afraid of hooking it sometimes, one of the things we'll see is they'll get to the top of the backswing, their pelvis will slide towards the target and their upper body gets left behind. One of the absolute truths that we found out about the golf swing is every single great player is moving both their chest and pelvis towards the target through transition. So once we get to the late backswing, especially even for a rear post golfer, every golfer is moving forward through transition, but we're going to keep the sway gap orientation that we have. So let's say I have a 2-inch chest to the right of my lower body sway gap. As I come down, I'm going to keep that sway gap for a moment in time until I land on my lead foot and start really pushing into the ground. And then it's going to change. As a Scott Scheffler, where I'm going to stay more centered or even slightly more left. As I come through transition, I'm moving both my chest and my pelvis towards the target. I'm a lot more stacked over my left side. So when I hit my left side with this body position, I'm going to push in a slightly different angle, and that's going to have an effect on the gap that gets created through impact. So we got setup, top of the backswing, through transition. We don't want to go forward only with our upper body, which would be a higher handicap failure. And we also don't want to go forward just with our lower body, which would be more of a lower handicap problem. Now, as we come into impact and we start pushing and the club starts weighing more and more and pulling away from us, we actually are eventually pulling back on the club. And so what we're going to see is as we get into the impact zone, the chest sway is actually going to move away from the target. As the club is pulling on us, we're pulling on it, and the pelvis is going to continue towards the target. So the sway gap through impact, the chest pulls away from the target in all good players, and the pelvis continues. Primarily this is to do with how the club is pulling on us and how we're pulling on it. Now the angle and the quantity that changes can change with different styles. So an under golfer is going to be pulling more back and create a slightly bigger sway gap through impact. The Scotty Scheffler, more on top front post golfer, is going to be, as they're pulling on the club, we're going to see them pulling straighter up. The chest is still moving away from the target, but the amount that it's moving away from the target is slightly less. So, sway gap, set it up correctly for your style at address. Set it correctly in the backswing, move through transition to your lead side at the right time according to your style, pull back on the club, and allow the pelvis to keep going towards the target. Again, the setup and backswing sway gaps really have a big effect on the direction that you swing.